And then they have to file something saying that this happened, and then hopefully the Department of Labor will certify the job. But because of how bad the economy is, first it takes at least a year before they certify the job. That's problem number one. In 50% of the cases, they don't certify the job. They do what's called an audit, which means that they, everything is electronic when you first apply, so they haven't seen the ads. They don't know for sure that you really recruited the way you said you did. So they say, okay, show us. And then the lawyer has to come up with a file showing them the actual piece of paper from the newspaper showing that it was actually, that the ad actually ran. Or they'll ask a question like, well, prove to us that this job requires a bachelor's degree, or prove to us that it requires a master's. And they give you 30 days to respond, and then they sit on the case for another 12 or 14 months. So it's not the easiest way to get a green card, but for reasons I'm going to explain, it's a procedure that a lot of people have to go through. All right, then there's ability to pay. If you have a large employer, that's a, economically solid employer, that's not a problem. But if you are going to work for a startup company or a relatively new company, a smaller company, that can be a problem. And worst of all, if you're doing what's called sort of self-sponsoring, like if you're an entrepreneur and you start a company and then you want to have yourself as the employee and get an H-1B for yourself, those cases are really suspect. I mean, because you have no track record. You're doing it to help yourself out. And so that's where ability to pay comes in. Okay, and then there's the availability of an immigrant visa number. And this is at the heart of the matter. Okay, so when you hear about huge backlogs, especially for people from India or China, like where they have to wait 6, 7, 8 years to get the green card, this all has to do with the lack of an availability of an immigrant visa. And what that means is that there are 140,000 immigrant visas available per year, and it's nowhere near enough. There's many, many more people who want these immigrant visas, which is a green card, than 140,000. So, and then on top of that, no one country can have more than 7% of them. So if you're from India or China, which has high, immigration rates, that 7% is going to be used up like that, and then you're going to be waiting. And right now, the wait, depending on your level of education, can be 6 or 7 years. So that's another whole issue. And now the thing is, though, the higher up you are, and I'm going to explain this, the higher up you are, the less your weight is going to be because there's less of you. So let me just get to the preference system. Okay, so they have this limited number of visas, and the question is, okay, now how do we give them out? Like, we have to find a fair way to do this. So what they've devised is this preference system. And if you're the first preference, you're going to get it the fastest and easiest. And this is what you have to be. You have to be pretty extraordinary to get it through the first preference. So there's lesser of you. There's less people that are going to be eligible to be outstanding researchers or professors. So the visas are going to be used less quickly. So if you're one of these people, you're never going to, and even if you're from China or India, you're never going to have to worry about a backlog because there's not enough, you know what I mean? They don't run out. It's as you go down this preference system, and there's more of you, like if the job only requires a BA, that's when they run out. So and I'll be explaining that. Okay, so this is the first preference. This is the fastest and easiest way to get a green card. And part of the reason for that is that you don't need a labor certification. You don't have to go through that ridiculous system of showing that you couldn't find qualified U.S. workers. And that's great. That you just saved yourself 2 or 3 years based on not having to go through that process. Okay, and who's it for? It's for outstanding researchers and professors and aliens of extraordinary ability. Now, what I see most of in my practice is the researchers and professors, because aliens of extraordinary ability, they have to be in the top 1% of their field. They tend to be older, where I have a lot more young people, who are younger, out of academic institutions. So what I see is a lot of outstanding researchers and professors. And now, what outstanding is sounds a little scary. It sounds like, most of my clients say, well, no, I couldn't be that. But you could be. It's possible that you are. And this is what they have a list. This is the type of evidence that you're going to have to show that you are an outstanding researcher or professor. Okay? Publications, I put that up first because they love publications. So the more publications you have, the more likely it is that you are one of these people. And they're talking basically publications in peer-reviewed journals, there are other publications that are acceptable. Yeah.
Are they publications that you've gotten since you've been here, or can they be from before you came here?
Yeah, they can be from before you came here. And really, what they're looking for is what they call international recognition. So having publications in other parts of the world is actually very good, because then that means that people know about you. Now, international recognition sounds like you're, like a movie star, like somebody says your name and everybody knows it, but that's not really what it means. It means that, you've published, people in that field who do that specific research have seen your name, or they've cited you. So that's what, and really what you're doing is all of this is showing this international recognition. All right, then there's presentations at international symposia. And sometimes your publications can come out of those presentations. So if you have conference publications, that counts as publications. Judging the work of others, they love this. Like if you have been asked to review an article for a peer-reviewed journal, that's great.
Are these actual check boxes that they have themselves, so they're giving you like points?
Who knows how they work? I mean, I have never worked for them, and they keep that a secret. Sometimes the way they work seems so arbitrary that I'm not really sure.
But these are like, they have some stipulations that these are their
yeah, they know what the regulations are, yeah. And then a lawyer puts it together in a letter, like, step by step, with like, these are the publications, these are the conferences. So, yeah, I think they know what they're looking for, although sometimes it seems like they don't. Right? Patents, they love patents, and contributions of original research in the field. So, let me just give you an example. Like I have a client who devised, I guess, a machine, for lack of a better word, that could detect pollution in the air, and that machine, which is not quite the right word, but I'm a layperson, was used at the Beijing Olympics to monitor the pollution. So that's an original contribution because nobody else had created that device. But it doesn't have to be a physical thing. It could be, that you came up with a theory that you were the first person to propose, and then other scientists cited it, built on it, and added to it. So that's what original research is.
It could be counted by the number of the time your publication was signed.
Yeah, exactly.
The
more citations,
your work normally is.
The more citations you have, the better. And another thing they like is when someone else has written about you, publication about you by someone else. So people think that means like where somebody has actually had an article dedicated to your work, but not necessarily. So if I don't have that, if nobody has written about that person's work, but they were cited in someone else's work a couple times, I might use that for that. I might say that this person's work was written about by someone else, and then put in that article where that person is cited. Okay. Now this is the second preference, and this is, this is where the job requires at least a master's degree, and it's going to be slower because there's more people out there with masters. And if you're from India or China, there's now backlogs in this area. I think that right now it's backlog like 4 years or so. But if you're not from India or China, any place else in the world, there's no backlog. So this is still a decent way to go if you're not from India or China. Right? But this requires a labor certification, and that's that whole procedure with the advertising. But there's an exception, and I have a lot of clients that fit in this exception. This is my favorite kind of case, actually. And what it is it's called the national interest waiver. And that means that what you do, the kind of work you do, and who you are, is exceptional enough to waive you from the obligation to have to go through this labor certification process. All right, so this is the gobbledygook test, which doesn't make a lot of sense. You can read it. Seeking employment in an area of substantial intrinsic merit, whatever that means. The benefit will be national in scope as opposed to local. And the national interest would be adversely affected if the labor certification were required, whatever that means. So what it means in practice is that, and I'll give you an example of